I'll just tell
Hi,
her, here we
everybody,
go.
and welcome to Friday with Fran. I'm your host, Shelly Kino of Shelly Kino IEP Consulting and Advocacy. Every Friday, I get to chat with my friend Fran, and you get to come and join along in our chats. Today, we are going to be discussing the difference between equipping versus enabling. And what qualifies Fran and I to talk about these things? Well, I mean, we really don't have to be qualified to talk about it, but we actually do have some qualifications. I'm a special educator with over 25 years experience, and Fran is a mom of 2 adult children who both have special needs, and she herself in the last couple of years has become someone with special needs. And so, Fran, what do you think is the definition of equipping versus enabling? What's the difference?
Oh, well, in lay terms, because I didn't look it up in the dictionary.
No, that's what I want. Is
just lay terms. All right. Well, this is my thought process. Enable, which may at one point not have the negative connotations that it does today. But it definitely, to me, has negative connotations. Means that you are trying to help someone do something, but you're doing it to such an extreme that you're not allowing them to learn it, and you're just doing it so that they can get it done.
I would agree.
You agree with that?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. So that's enabling. What's equipping?
Equipping is to provide the tools and the training necessary for the individual to be able to accomplish it to the best of their ability.
Those
within their own
definitions. Yeah. See, you didn't need a dictionary. or Google or whatever we use today.
Okay. I still use
think
dictionaries. I'm weird, but yeah.
I would totally agree with both of those definitions. Yeah. And I think you define them very well. So now that we have the definitions of them, we need to talk about some examples. And so what would be an example from your personal experience? Have people enabled you versus equipped you?
Oh, I've had a bit of both, but I've been blessed with the circle of people that my support system, they tend to equip me more than enable me. But I was blessed with a great home health speech person when I came home from the rehab center following my stroke, and she was very much about equipping me, not enabling me. Good. And then, so to enable, what did people do? Instead of helping me come up with a way to figure something out with my number issue, people just did it.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I was at a doctor, people would speak for me rather than allow me to speak. And then if I got confused, help me out. And then, and there were times though, if my brain wasn't totally working, I needed that help. But then there are times when in order to grow and to learn what I could or couldn't do at that time, I needed you're
squirrely looking at the comments, aren't you?
Yes. I just happened to see someone say something. Hi, yeah. Mom. Hi, Fran.
Yep, we have 2 people that have said hello.
Hello.
Hello, Anna, and hello, Violet.
Sorry, you tickled me.
That's okay.
The comment. But to equip me, oh my goodness, I have been so blessed and humbled because so many people have equipped me to be where I am today. And I think the key to equipping more than anything is believing that the person that you want to equip has the capability in some form or capacity to do it to some degree, what you're trying to equip them to do.
Yes, I would 100% concur. And we often, without realizing it, presume incompetence versus presuming competence.
Yes.
And I think that's exactly what you're speaking to.
So, such as I count with letters. And if people had continued to count for me, I probably would not have had the ability to figure that out.
Right.
My speech. Oh, this is the one I really want to remember. I have a card that I present to when I go to appointments or meet with someone that who might not be familiar with all of my different abilities. And let me see if I can find it. But my speech person helped me come up with it, but it was more about empowering. Another E word. Here we go. I guess we're going to go with alliterations today. Didn't plan on that, but here we go. So, there's my daughter in the background.
Hi. I don't know if she can see.
Shelly's waving at you. I got all the way up there too. I'm sorry. She forgot her mask.
No. Sign of the times.
May I read this?
Absolutely.
That I have a cognitive linguistic deficit and require accommodations. I have difficulty with numerical digits, but do better when numbers are written in written form. This negatively affects my understanding of things, such as dates and time. Please give me extra time to process information involving numbers and other instructions. Also, I'm oversensitive to my environment and may become overwhelmed. Thank you for your patience and understanding. And then I had to add, you have permission to communicate with the person accompanying me, because sometimes doctors or other people wouldn't even communicate. But this I hand to the person prior to sometimes even communicating with them. But then the funny thing is, so this is something that equips me.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But if the person I hand it to does not read it, I cannot be equipped. And then the person with me sometimes has to step in. But I wouldn't say they're enabling me at that point, but the person that should have read it then enabled the person to help me rather than equip me that was with me.
Right. And based on what you and I had talked about in other conversations previously, I just realized that we didn't really say which one we think is better, but I think it comes through that we both feel equipping is better than enabling.
Yes.
Because of just that example that you gave, that you want to be able to and are capable of doing things on your own. And I feel that gives you, again, that empowerment, but to take that away from you must feel, well, I don't want to say how it must feel. How does it feel?
Belittling. Sometimes if sometimes doctors will literally talk to the person with the person who is accompanying me. And so then I just shut down. I just take off and I let them take over the appointment, because what's the point? The doctor doesn't see me as having anything valid to contribute, so why should I care?
Right.
So it takes away my freedom, my independence, my confidence, my self-esteem.
Right. Guess who's here?
Hi, Jonas.
So yeah, and that's actually pretty much what I thought it would feel like. I had an experience recently, and it is what I wrote my most recent blog about. And it was kind of similar to what you're talking about, where I felt like, I have something to say, I'm just struggling getting it out. Mm-hmm. And the comments that my friend was making were not, that he didn't intend them to be hurtful or unhelpful, but that's exactly what they were.
Right.
And I perceived his comments just like it sounds like you said, you're like, why am I going to try now? Because you've shut me down by not talking to me, or by talking to the person that's with me instead of me.
Right.
And we've mentioned before that you are in a wheelchair most of the time now. Does that happen often, that people will talk to you in that they're assuming incompetence as
Yes.
far as your abilities, or that they talk to, if
They
you have
talk to me, yes. Right. Because I actually have a bachelor's degree, associate's degree, and multiple certifications, but not that that makes you intelligent, because it doesn't.
Right.
But people would not think that if they saw me sitting, or often do not communicate to me that way. But I want to take this, I want to go on a little rabbit trail, but it's tied into it.
Okay.
Because when you were saying what were our qualifications, one thing you didn't mention was I worked with adults who have developmental disabilities. I worked with them for probably this many years.
15.
Okay. Yeah. So, and one of the things I noticed a lot was, even when new employees would come in, they wanted to do for the people because they just wanted to make it easier for them. And they wanted, and they wanted to care for them, and and it wasn't out of malice. A lot of times we enable people not out of malice, but because we love them so much that we want to make we think, oh, their life is so hard. So I just want to make it easy in any way I can. But sometimes in making it easy, we're making it harder in the long run.
Yes, I would absolutely agree with that.
So I would oftentimes people, a new person would be trained by multiple people there, so you would get different perspectives. And a lot of times people would say, well, Fran's a real stickler for the rules. and Fran's going to make you follow their programming, and Fran's going to, and she's going to make them do for themselves. And at first it hurt a little bit when I would hear my coworkers say that, but then I almost took pride in it, because I was like, yeah, but then I realized something as well, though. Now that I'm on the other side of that coin, sometimes there are times, though, when it's okay to do for them.
Right.
And I wouldn't call it enabling then. It would be called, that person can't do it at that moment, physically, mentally, something. They're just not able, so don't make them do it.
Right.
So I would take it to the wrong extreme sometimes. And I realize that now. I've actually gone and apologized to some of the people that I would push, and I was just like, I'm so sorry. I said I had the best intention, but in my best intention, I didn't take into the fact that you have feelings, and you're a person, and you have good days and bad days. So this has been eye-opening for me. I wasn't perfect before, and I'm not perfect now. I just would like to think that I'm learning and growing every day.
Yeah. And I think that's the best that we can be, is to just constantly be learning. And thank you, Alex. That's a great word. Alex just chimed in and said balance. And it's very true that we need that, you got to have the push, because sometimes when you don't want to do it, you do need that little motivation, because you can. But sometimes you also have to step back and say, okay, I've given a little push, and I can tell that this person is at their limit for this moment, and no amount of pushing, no amount of whatever is going to change that. So I am going to walk alongside them and help with that. I do want to, and I didn't catch these to put them up, but I do want to put up a couple of other comments. This was Anna, when you were talking about your difficulty with numerical digits, she says, I love that. I completely understand. I have a learning disability, and numbers and things like that are hard for her. And then when we were talking about how it makes you feel that people were enabling you instead of equipping you, then she said, you just said everything I have felt, and it still happens at times, and I have not left the house because of it. Anna, that makes me very sad. And
Me too.
hopefully through times like these,
And I hope you have a support somewhere that will step alongside you, as Shelley was even talking about, and walk it out with you. Empower, equip you, and encourage. Oop, there's another one. Yep.
We are on the E's today.
But I kind of feel like Eeyore, so I don't know.
There's another E. Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's.
No, that's okay. Fran mentioned to me before we started that she's not feeling 100% well today. And, but yet, you know, she is pushing herself. She is equipping us with good knowledge and encouraging.
So I may not be eloquent today.
Well, you're doing a great job. You always do a great job. So I appreciate
the E word in there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
I'm coming back.
So we've talked about some of your personal experiences that, you know, either that you did working with adults or that you have had happen to you.
What do you want to hear about with my kiddo? Yeah. Because that's where, even as I'm talking about it, and as Alex said, balancing, and I'm horrible at it with my daughter. I so desire to empower her and to encourage her and equip her, and we butt heads, and because I don't know how to communicate sometimes, because we're so alike sometimes, or I'm in it. I'm in the trenches.
Right.
And sometimes I need an outside perspective. And I'm blessed to have that from a few people that will say, hey, have you tried this? Or, hey, Fran, back off. just give her some space. But she's got to get it done. She's got to get it done right now. No, she doesn't. It's not that important in the scheme of life. In the scheme of this very moment, yeah, you might have wanted it, but was it necessary? And so I'm learning how to parent Allison through this season.
Yeah, it is very difficult. And I don't know if my daughter is still watching or not, but it's very different with your own child. I can give amazing advice and, you know, give scenarios and, you know, say this instead of that. And, but when it comes to my own daughter, I wasn't always doing those things. And she and I are like you and Allie. We are a lot alike. And I don't know that we butt heads all that often, but we have definitely had our times over the years where I was pushing her probably more than I should have at a given moment. If she's still watching, she's more than welcome to chime in. I think maybe I don't want her to. But yeah, it is difficult to catch yourself, and sometimes I feel like we get into situations where we feel like we have to win that moment, because if we don't win that moment, then that's going to turn in, you know, it's going to just snowball and become something different than what we want. But I would say in my experience is that if you can just stop, catch yourself, and go, okay, wait, what's really happening? What's the underlying communication behind this behavior, behind your child's behavior and your own?
Yes.
Why am I pushing? Why is this so important to me right now? And thankfully, I feel like I've done a Okay, job. I'm still waiting for Violet to chime in and say something. I keep looking at the comments like, oh, she's going to rip me apart shortly. But I mean, we do, as parents, we do make mistakes. That's comes with the territory. I mean, that comes with the territory of being human. We have said that multiple times in our chats that we're both human. We're not perfect. We have never been perfect, and we aren't perfect today, but we are getting better and working towards that.
You know, the word that keeps coming to mind as you're talking, grace.
Yeah.
Giving so often, I know. I was really working on it. I'm like, I can't, but the word is grace. There's no other substitute.
Yeah, no, I know.
So often we and it's easier to give grace to others than those close to us, and even harder to give grace to ourselves.
Yes.
To know that, okay, I failed. I failed at that parenting moment. I failed in that moment as a teacher. I failed in that moment as a professional. What can I do to reboot myself and re-enter that, starting afresh and anew? And it's, you have to give yourself grace. And I don't do so well at that. I tend to beat myself up with it multiple times. Like kind of like beating yourself. What is it? What is that saying? So I don't know. Anyway,
we're always our harshest critic.
Yeah.
So maybe were you thinking beating a dead horse as far as
that's it. Yeah. I was like, but I'm like, it didn't sound. So
I don't know if you saw this, but Anna says, thank you. Listening to you all helps to equip. Anyone gave a life coach in their pocket. I have a hard time with teaching my son who has autism, and doing homework is hard, but I do have support. That's very good. I'm glad that you have that support, Anna. Helping with homework with a student or a child with autism, you've had experience with that, Fran. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Okay, sure.
I like to put her on the spot because she's like, sure, I'll tackle that.
When Allison was younger, it was very difficult. She would come home with homework that probably should take maybe just from the 12 to the 6 on the clock. And we would be sitting there going around the clock, probably D times, just in just everyone in tears, everyone screaming, nobody happy by the time we're done, and the homework still's not done. Right. Or she falls asleep because she's had her medication. She missed supper because it sat there cold because she was so upset and distraught. To the point where we would say, okay, we're going to tackle this. And we broke it down. And we're just going to, even if it was just, and a lot of times I would have a plan, but she would come home and you could tell from the moment she walked into the door that, oh my goodness, we weren't even going to tackle this. We might get maybe part of this one.
Right.
So I think the biggest thing I learned over time with Allison, besides I couldn't do it alone, I needed others to step alongside me. And thankfully I had people that would sit there with her. We would take turns, we would step away. But the biggest thing I think is being flexible.
Yeah.
Because especially with autism and with oppositional defiance, and you cannot be rigid.
Right.
Because they're rigid. And rigid that you can't put something, one side has to be able to mold around the other. And if you're both rigid, nobody's molding to anything, and you're just banging against each other and you don't fit.
Right. And there's research behind that. The more upset you get, the less rational you're able to be. And so the more you butt heads, the more you're just not going to be able to figure out the solution to whatever the problem is at the moment. And you're also not going to be able to make any good decisions. So from a teacher's perspective, I would have to stop myself and say, okay, I can spend 45 minutes butting heads about this particular thing, or I can walk away for a minute, let the student walk away for a minute. Each of us get calm, get out of the very emotional state, and then come back and tackle a little bit at a time. And even letting the student know, okay, we do need to try to get through this in X amount of time, but we're going to do this much, and then we're going to take a break this much, and then we're going to do this much, and then we're going to take a break this, so the effort going in, the break would be set ahead of time and would be maybe a little bit longer than what the amount of effort had to be to put into that short time, because depending on what it is, I can remember myself in high school geometry, and I could sit at the table for hours and nothing was going to penetrate. But I oftentimes wouldn't let myself stop, because I felt if I just keep pushing harder, if I just, I don't know, my dad can say it to me 100 times, and the 101st time it's suddenly going to click. And that wasn't the case at all. We both should have just left it. And that and again, there's science to this. It resets your brain. It calms your emotions down. And then your brain can communicate to all the parts that it needs to communicate to. And it is amazing. Even if you would have spent 45 minutes butting heads, but you take a 10-minute break and then you work for 10 minutes, and then you take a 10-minute break and you work for 10 minutes, it still took you 30 minutes, but you've preserved some of the relationship that if you were butting heads for the 45 minutes would have been damaged.
Right. Yeah.
So Anna, I hope that helps. We will certainly, take more questions, or if you want some more advice. She tells us that we are wonderful. So thank you for saying that. And that, some of the things that you said happens, and he's 9 years old. He's high functioning. OPD, I'm not sure I know what OPD is, OCD, and sensory issues, and ADHD.
Probably OOD.
Could
ODD.
be. Could be. So, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
So, what I was just trying to think back. Some of the times when I have enabled my kids.
Yes.
Rather than equip them. Well-meaning, I prior to Luke being born, I knew there was a possibility he had Down syndrome. And so I researched as much as I could, but I kind of just set it aside because I didn't go ahead with some of the screening that would have told me for sure, because I was going to carry him and have him anyway. And so when he was born, he had all his therapies and everything, and I would push him and I would make him do. And then I had Allison really close, and she was technically, I thought Allie would be born and help with Luke as she got older, and they would walk alongside and be wonderful. Actually, I thought Allie was going to be a boy in the grand scheme of life. In my plan, not God's plan, but in my plan, Allie would be a boy, and she would be there to take her brother into the bathroom. I had it all planned out. But
as we do, we make our plans.
Many are our plans, but the Lord's purpose prevails. That's one of my favorite scriptures right now. But so he, but once Allie was born, and she cried a lot. She cried all the time.
Oh,
she screamed for her first couple of years of her life, unless you were holding her.
Wow.
or she was nursing, or she fell asleep. But a lot of times you had to hold her, or she'd wake back up. So I wore her a lot, and Luke wasn't walking, so I wore him a lot.
Oh my gosh.
Well, it worked out okay. I mean, just think, if I'd had my stroke then, I don't think I could have worn them both and done it all. But God,
No,
in
that's
His
fine.
plan, knew that they needed to be where they were.
Right.
So, but I noticed, especially looking back, there were times that I had every intention of equipping my kids, but to make it more convenient for me, I enabled them.
Yeah.
Instead of giving them, because when you equip somebody, it takes more time than when you just do for them.
Yeah. Yep.
Absolutely. And I know there are times we don't have time to wait for someone to get their shoes on. You literally just don't have it, and you have to do it.
Right.
But scheduling it, and when you do have the time, I think is the important thing. When you have the time, you need to allow them to do.
Yes.
Because when you do it for them, then you are enabling. When you do it when you're on a time schedule, you have to be at a doctor's appointment. There is no choice. You have to dress, and if you're not dressing, then I have to dress you. I don't want any, and I really, really, really don't want anybody listening to this now, later, or whenever, to feel condemned.
No.
That they're failures as parents, as educators, as professionals, or people in general, as a person in life, that you've enabled somebody rather than equip, because we've all done it.
Right. Absolutely.
Because people that enable are generally people that have the most loving hearts, and they just want to make it easy for those that they see that are struggling, that have it harder in life.
Yeah.
And that was kind of why I wanted to talk on this, was because I know that sometimes I experience and sometimes I do it, and it's a balancing act. Going back to what Alex has said, it's just balance.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And again, especially when it's your own child, I still, and I know I do it. And if I don't catch myself, my husband will remind me, you've just enabled her, and I'm like, yeah, I know. And he's like, no buts, or, okay, I get it at this particular time. But yeah. And what you said, sometimes it is necessary. And I don't know that that's necessarily an enablement moment, because there are time constraints in life, but I really appreciated what you said about, then go back later or schedule a time later to practice putting the shoes on. And I also wanted to talk to that about breaking things into smaller steps, because sometimes
I'm sorry,
we end up enabling because they can't do the final product, and we forget about all the little steps, like shoe tying, for example. There are a lot of steps to shoe tying, or or getting dressed in general, or getting ready in general to do something. But if we break it down into those smaller steps, and I used to do this with Violet, and I used to do it with my students as well, that, okay, they'd come to me, their shoe's untied, and they'd say, can you tie my shoe? Well, you have to show me that you've tried first. And then I will, we'll talk about the steps and we'll work through it. And so a lot of times they would tie their shoe and be like, oh, I didn't know I could tie my shoe, or, oh, I've never done that before. Or,
awesome.
Or they would, they'd start off with the laces apart, they'd cross them over, and then they'd look at me and do this, and I'm like, okay, you tried. So, and then I'd try to talk them through putting, making the first loop or whatever. And the more practice with those kinds of things.
Velcro.
Well,
sorry,
there's that too.
I'm just.
But did you enable by putting Velcro? Or did you equip?
My son, no, I equipped my son, because at least then he could put shoes on. And my daughter, she still can't tie shoes well. Ask how many times she has to retie her shoes.
Right.
So she still has well, she wears Crocs right now because she's figured it out. She acquired a pair of my Crocs and has not returned them.
Well, and
for
that's,
lack of a better word.
yeah. And
Oh,
that's,
hi, Crystal's on. I'm not,
yeah.
I don't know if you
Hey,
said hi.
Crystal. Anna says Velcro! Exclamation points. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, what you need to do for your individual family is your decision. And you know, I mean, whatever that is, whether it's
you know the person,
right, and
the
you know
people
them in that
close to the
moment,
person know them best.
right?
And no matter how much professional input or studies have been done, sometimes breaking it down to what you know of that person is, and taking, like you said, breaking it into steps that just start
Yeah.
in the beginning. Don't start
Yep.
at the end, start in the beginning. And don't do what I do. I was laughing more about the steps because, okay, so for Allison, has received therapies for a really, really long time. When she was little, she started. And one of the things they said is Allison cannot follow multi-step directions. Cannot follow multi-step directions. I process things really, really quickly in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah,
Balance,
I saw you look
Alex.
over at that. It's true, Alex. You're calling us out, and that's good.
My brain goes really, really fast, and it hasn't slowed down. And that was part of why I ended up with a bunch of concussions, is because I never slowed down in my head, but my body has really slowed down, and I still want it to go like it used to, and it just can't some days.
Right.
But Allison is supposed to have maybe a couple step directions, maybe, depending on what it is. Well, I tend to think, okay, well, she needs to do the laundry, she needs to do the litter box, and I need her to take a shower, she needs to take her meds, and she really needs to pick up the living room. So I just, and I vomit out the entire everything that needs to be done all in one blow. And then she looks at me, and then she just sits there and ignores me.
Yeah.
And so then I get mad and I get frustrated. And I'm like, Allison, you've got to do da, 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 da. And she sits down. And then I'm like, little birdie will sometimes say balance. Too many steps. And I'm like, oh, okay. Allie, can you tell me what I've asked you to do? And a lot of times she has no clue. She only remembers the final thing.
Right.
And she's back now. But so it's just a matter of giving her the steps. Thanks, Al. She brought me my favorite thing.
Ah.
So she's taken to exercising by walking to go get a soda. I'm not sure how that balances, but she's exercising, so we're gonna go with it.
That's right. Little wins sometimes have to be celebrated and thought about.
So, but what we've decided, what we've done to empower, to equip her now, because I still have that whole bunch of list in my head of things that need to get done. Mm-hmm. So instead, she'll get paper and a pen, and she writes it.
That's
as
awesome.
We talk about what needs to be done. She writes it, and then we come upon a time that it needs to be done by.
Oh, fabulous.
And then occasionally throughout the day, I may say, hey, how's that list coming? And we also talk about the consequences if the list isn't done by that time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I struggle a bit, is following through on the consequence.
Yeah.
So because if I don't follow through, then I enable.
Do you? Crystal just commented. I'll show that in just a second. But
okay,
when you say consequences, normally we think consequences mean negative things, but consequences are positive also.
Yes.
So do you have positive consequences if the list gets done by a certain time? If that, like if you say it's supposed to be done at 7 and she gets it done at 6?
We have not recently. I haven't. In the past, I have used positive ones.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, you're right. It is. Thank you for reminding me that. Right now, it's the electronics get turned off till the following day.
Oh, gotcha. Right. So Crystal says she does all of her chores in the evening, even though her parents don't tell her to. She added that below. So she hopes we have a good weekend. And then Anna says, I've made a chart for what days he does certain things like clean up, and he's allowed to listen to his favorite music, and he's always has input in all of it, including how long it takes to get done. Anna, that's awesome.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's
the
really
fact
cool.
that you are including him in that is fabulous. And there is something about having a checklist. I have a friend who recently published a book, and it's called The Checklist Life. It's by Tracy Bianco. Let's give her a little plug. And but there is something about having a list and being able to say, I did that. I did that. I did that. And especially during the pandemic times, being able to say, I got out of bed today. I made the bed today. Even if you got out of bed and then it was 6 hours later that you made the bed, you still did both things, and celebrating those little accomplishments or those little wins. Some days, what would be a little win on Thursday might be a huge win on Friday because of different reasons. Sometimes getting out of bed is a huge win. Again, especially during this pandemic, especially when we were locked in stay-at-home mode, that was mentally draining. And I know there are some places in our state, in Illinois, and also around the country that are pushing the limit of we may have to go back to a little bit of that stay-at-home mode. And because we're kind of, I don't know, for whatever reason, our cases are growing, whether that's because people aren't doing what they had been doing, or it's because we're not in the stay-at-home mode anymore. But so checklists are great. Lists of visual schedules for some students is fantastic. Or, like you said, for Ellie, a written schedule, depending on the ability level of the person that the list is for.
It's funny. I have a magnetic board. I was thinking of Anna when she was talking about her chart. I have a magnetic board that I got a long time ago at an educator's store in our area, and it came with magnets on it and stuff. And when Luke was living at home, we had pictures. I had just put magnets on there with pictures of things that he was responsible for, and then he would put a magnet in the spot. And once that whole list was done, once he got all those, and I don't remember what he got, but he got something positive out of it. If he didn't get it all done, it wasn't that he didn't get anything, but if he got his list done. And now it actually, I converted it to a word magnet chart for Allison now.
Nice.
And it has some of the similar things and some other things on it that were geared towards what she needs to accomplish to help run the house.
Yeah. And we did something very similar to that with Violet. And I'm ashamed to admit that we didn't always follow through with her positive rewards. Like we had a jar and we had sat down with her and said, okay, if you do all of your chores for the week or the day or whatever the time frame was, we're going to put 6 things in a jar that you would like to have happen. And then you get to draw one of those things out after the week, and then we'll do it. Well, unfortunately, we put some like big pie in the sky kind of ideas in that jar at first, like go to the zoo, or, and then it was, oh, okay, that's what she drew out. And, dad's got to work and mom's got to work. And we're going to grandma's this weekend, and it was like, okay, well, we'll do it next weekend. And then next weekend never happened. Mm-hmm. So it is very, and Violet, I'm sorry if you're still watching that we didn't always follow through. I think you turned out okay. Maybe not. I don't know.
I think she did.
I thank you. She does have trust issues, though. Maybe that's where that started. But yeah, I had to give myself that grace that, okay, we need to come up with things like just her and dad, or her and I sitting down and listening to a story, or playing a board game, or whatever it was, where it was a much more reasonable, positive reinforcer than, like I said, those big pie in the sky kind of things. So I do definitely still recommend, that sort of a system, but know your limitations and don't set yourself and your child up for failure like we kind of did. Mm-hmm. So for anybody who's watched this and ever thought, oh man, Shelly, she has all these great ideas and she must be amazing. No, you learn as you go. And I've learned from my mistakes, and I definitely have made them, and I continue to make them.
Can we go backwards a little bit to where we started?
Yes. The difference between equipping and enabling?
Yeah.
Yes.
For just a second. I was just thinking on this. The enabling part. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've called people out, including ourselves, for enabling people.
Right.
So how can we, people who like to do and like to help and how can we move ourselves from being enablers to equippers? What are some things that we can change? What we can do differently to empower our loved ones, the ones we work with around us?
I think one of the best things we can do is just to ask ourselves, what is this going to look like in the future? So if I continue to do this, whatever this is, for my child, what does that look like in a year? What does that look like in 5 years? Mm-hmm. And try to imagine the difference between if I help my child learn this skill versus if I continue to do this skill for my child all the time.
Okay. I like that. I like how you broke that down.
And also, this is actually something I'm working on, some trainings for teachers and paraprofessionals when they are working with students. Paraprofessionals, especially an individual paraprofessional, in my experience, many times enables way more than equip. And I think a lot of it is because they feel that their job is dependent upon how well the student does. And so they often inadvertently will say, are you sure that's the answer you want to put? And they won't let the child make the mistake on their own and have that learning that is necessary, not necessary, but that comes from making mistakes. Yeah.
Not failing long term, but from failing
right.
in the task at the hand.
Right. And also, like you said, yeah. And like you said before, the time, the time on the clock at school, we've got to move from this subject to this subject to this subject. And it's sometimes just easier for the paraprofessional to do that step than to allow the child to do that step. And so we have to think, and it's almost the exact wording, am I enabling or am I equipping? Is this something that maybe a peer could help the student with? Or is this something that I really need to step back and let this child figure it out? Because it's so amazing when I've dealt with students that they felt like, oh, I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I just sometimes I would say things and sometimes I wouldn't. And to just watch them. And sometimes it was painstaking because it took so long. But the look on their face when they figured something out
Mm-hmm.
that they didn't think they could do was totally worth the amount of time it took. Because from that point forward, their self-esteem went up and they were more willing to try more things the next time.
I'm going to go with a real quick example
Okay.
of a tangible example.
Okay.
When I used to instruct at a therapeutic writing place,
Mm-hmm.
and we would have maybe a writer that was deathly afraid of horses to even be near them.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could go a bunch of different directions, and you would have to, and some days it would work and some days it wouldn't work. The same thing that you had tried the previous lesson. But ultimately, when they overcame and they were empowered and equipped to do it on their own, the smile on their face made it all worth it, even if it took the whole season just to finally get them on a horse.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And to feel confident that they could do that, because the same location where you're talking about, I can remember writers too that their family's like, no, just put them on the horse. They'll get used to it. They'll eventually get used to it. And for the most part, the majority of them did. But it was just like, okay, yeah, I have to do this. I'm not, they weren't excited about it. But for the ones that overcame a fear or managed to process the steps needed to get on the horse or whatever it was that had prevented them from being on the horse before,
mm-hmm.
was so much greater. And it did so much more for the individual than to just force the child on the horse or,
right.
To whatever it is. We have already been on almost an hour.
Is that good? No.
Well, I mean, it seems like we just started. So for that, I think our conversation has flowed fabulously. But remember, if I'm going to upload this to IGTV, we got to keep it under an hour. We got to keep it under 60 minutes.
5.
So
we may have to do another part to it.
Yeah.
To be continued.
Yeah, we might have to continue this either next week or another time. I was really hoping next week to talk to you about remote learning because
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm presenting a positive image now. Here we go. Yes, remote learning.
Can't wait to dive in.
Remote learning.
Yeah.
Partial remote learning.
Yeah, and the reason I want to talk about it is because it is, very prevalent for everyone in education right now, but it's also something that you are having to deal with in your own personal life with Allie. And I'm in a small sense, my daughter we moved her back to college yesterday. I hope and pray that she gets to stay there all semester. But there's no guarantee right now. So whether we talk about remote learning or we talk about something else,
we will talk about it. It is valid. It is now. It is good.
It's Alex, always. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your input today. It's wonderful to have input and to
yes. Thank you. Anna and Alex for joining us and questions and comments, and for Crystal and Violet, and somebody else said hi. Oh, I guess that was Anna at the beginning. Anna and Violet had said hi. And I've been kind of watching over on my phone and seeing that other people have joined us throughout the hour today. And we had at one point 7 people watching us live. So that's the most we've had so far. So that's good. And we thank you so much for joining us and being part of our conversations. Like we said,
and equipping us to do what we do.
Yes, because we'll continue to do this. But as I said last week, it is so much better and so much nicer when we have people giving us that encouragement and that input and those questions. And because it just is. It's just, I mean, Fran and I can sit and talk. Like, I think last week when this was over, we talked offline for like 2 more hours. So, I mean, she and I don't have a problem having a conversation with each other, but we do this because we want to reach out and help others with our experiences, another E word. And to be able to encourage and equip,
empower.
And empower and exercise. Oh wait, no, that wasn't one of our E words today.
But we were very eloquent.
Oh, there we go. All right, we are hitting those E words today. We just have to come up with an E word for grace.
I don't know.
Yeah, but yeah, we'll think on that. We'll see what we can come up with for next week. But again, thank you, Fran, and thank you everyone for joining us. And if you have liked this,
excellent outreach. Good E-word, Alex. Sorry.
Yes, there we go. Excellent. If you like this, please give it a thumbs up or give it a like. If you want to continue to catch us on the Fridays or the Tuesdays when I do the #NoLimits, make sure you subscribe to the channel on YouTube, or you are following my Facebook page or my Instagram page so that you can catch when we go live on those places. And again, it is Friday with Fran. It has been a wonderful Friday. I hope you all have a great weekend. And remember, together, we are making the world better for all, one IEP or person at a time. Have a great one, everybody.
Bye.